Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining us, and hopefully one of your better Zoom calls of the week. My name is Paul Menzies, and I have been asked to chair the Marketing Society Star Awards by Graham and the Marketing Society this year. It gives me great pleasure and pride to do so, and I'm super excited to seeing all of your work and indeed seeing you in person on June the 23rd. My day job is looking after or heading up beer brand and marketing at C&C in Great Britain. But I would like to start by applying a little disclaimer today because I have a 9-week-old child through a room and he is finding his vocal cords, shall we say. So if there's any background noise, I do apologise. But let's get cracking. I have some information to share. I have a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to introduce 3 fantastic guests talking about gin, pies, and some very important government messaging. So with regards to housekeeping, all of the judging and entry criteria and information is on the website, and that is starawards.marketingsociety.com. The deadline for all entries is the 14th of February. Although you can dip into your pockets or indeed your business's pockets and pay for a late submission. And just to remind that you do not need to be a Marketing Society member to enter enter awards or into your work into any of the categories. But judging is open, and I would urge you all to do so because it's a great way to learn about work and learn about what's happening in our industry, and also meet colleagues and peers within the industry as well. That's only open to members. And of course, with regards to any advice that I might have on writing entries, and I did so last year, and some of my colleagues will be doing so for some of our work at C&C this year, I'd refer back to this year's theme, and it's the building blocks of brilliance. And of course, external scenarios and situations have meant that our plans, our stimulus, our projects, and our brands and businesses have been impacted by the pandemic for the last 2 years. And of course, the stimulus that bring about our brand strategy or our campaign plans has changed. We perhaps had to be agile, perhaps had to change the way we do certain things. So I would encourage to really bring that to life. If it was certain stimulus, be that sales channel, be that brand health, be that purchase funnel, then by all means bring that to life and tell the story of how you responded to that within the entry. But that's the only entry advice I'm going to give because we've got 3 fantastic guests here. Just some other information to share is that the Marketing Society this year have added 2 new awards to the Star Awards. The first one is a Chairman's Award for Impact on a Limited Budget. And that applies for any campaign or project that achieved great things from a budget of £10,000 or less. Obviously, creativity has probably come to the fore here. It's perhaps required some agility because of COVID. And I'm sure there'll be some very interesting focus on return on investment from that lower budget. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the entries there. And second is the Simon Scott Award for Creativity and Craft. And this is in memory of Simon Scott, who sadly passed away in 2021 and is very missed within and will be very missed within our industry. And this one's not open for general entry. But again, I look forward to seeing what work is celebrated for creativity and craft. I've got a polite request for you all to please engage with us using the hashtag StarAwards22 or indeed our Twitter handle at MarketingSocSco. And we can use that all the way through to the awards ceremony, hopefully in person on June the 23rd. And lastly is a request for questions for our guests. They're all going to share fantastic work that won awards within the Star Awards last year. Please share within the chat function questions about their entries, their campaigns, the process that led to their award-winning work. We will have a Q&A section at the end of the hour, and I will try to get around as many questions as possible. But without much further ado, we're going to get to that gin, pies and government communications. And I'm going to pass over to our first guest speaker. It's David.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. Hopefully this will work. So somebody shout if you can see that okay now, and if it's in full screen.
We can see it, David, but it's slightly cut. That's it now. Lovely.
That's it now. There we go. Sorted. So yes, listen, thanks for coming along, folks. Thanks for listening. Before I go any further, don't get too excited. That does say top 6 tips, not top 6 tips. But yeah, hopefully I can give you some advice that might help you win an award and maybe even have a little bit more fun in the process of doing so. My top tips are these. So the judges are your customer, but the judges are clueless. Start at the end, rack up the Red Bull, change the world and share the love. And just to make sure that everybody at least stays till the end of my talk or doesn't fall asleep, how to cheat. So if you're wondering who I am and why I'm talking today, as Paul mentioned there, we won a gold award last year. We first entered the awards, I work at Bright Signals, and we first entered the awards back in 2015, just after we started. So we've been entering for 6 years. In that time, we've won 5 digital golds, 4 digital silvers, and a couple of golds for things like advertising and integrated. So I guess we seem to have a knack in the digital side of things, but hopefully something for everyone, because we've worked beyond that particular discipline. I guess the context is that, but particularly for this year, the award that won the digital communications gold was for Edinburgh Gin. Before we get into the tips, what I wanted to do is just give you a quick overview of the paper itself. I'll jump around a little bit after that. I just wanted to give you a kind of sense of the kind of structure of it, so it all makes a bit more sense. So we'll walk through it pretty quickly. So yeah, Edinburgh Gin, digital communications, straight into objectives to begin with. The very first page, context, a kind of wide scene setting, context setting page to begin with. Then 2 pages of objectives. First of all, talking here about commercial objectives, so things like revenue, particular commercial goals around Christmas and summertime for Edinburgh Gin. Then a page on brand and digital objectives. So talking here about brand measures and a handy table on the right hand side, which is a handy way to save words. And then digital objectives like reach and resonance and so on. Strategy section, again, starting really wide, talking about the long and short of it. So Les Binet and Peter Field, you might well know about their kind of seminal paper. What they say, I'll just read this out because it contextualizes, I guess, the whole paper. So short-term sales activations typically don't drive long-term brand growth, while long-term brand building activity may well not drive short-term sales, which creates a resourcing conundrum as brands try to balance the need for both. And of course, when you're stuck in a COVID-fueled cash crisis, it's harder than ever to justify long-term brand building investment that doesn't move the needle on short-term revenue. And the key premise being we were setting out to achieve both long and short. And then a quick slide on kind of brand and creative strategy, sort of 2 brand pillars, again, leaning into those 2 things, long and short, but very much working together. And then I guess the core premise of the whole paper, which I'll come back to in a minute, but this notion of a full funnel approach. So it says here, most digital funnels focus on clicks and conversions. We wanted to achieve more from big idea brand communication through to performance content to motivate purchase, and then conversion optimization, and finally advocacy, leveraging our community to drive peer-to-peer recommendation. Key to this would be Bright Signals' agile approach, leveraging the unique but typically neglected advantages of digital channels and being both instantly measurable and dynamic. So continuous testing and endless iteration, often in real time. I'll come back to that. That's really the kind of key thing to understand about how this paper is structured. In terms of what we did, I'll just read out a couple of bits of this just to bring some life and colour to it. But top of the funnel, first, brand building activity. So our Filled with Wonder brand film was designed from the get-go to be highly optimized for digital channels. It's constructed from a series of vignettes that land brand cues from a magical rhubarb forest to a glimpse of Edinburgh Castle and a fiery ginger meteor. In the full 40-second film, each scene is joined together with seamless transitions to encourage continued viewing instead of scrolling. But equally importantly, the scenes are designed to work as a series of 5 to 10 second social shorts for low attention, audio off environments with a thumb stopping opening. So what I'm doing here is taking content that may have lived beyond digital, but really looking at it through a digital lens and making the point that for this category, it was optimized for digital channels. And then into the kind of middle of the funnel, the demand driving piece. So we're getting a little bit more product focused here. Still nice content, but more giving me a reason to buy or a reason to want to drink it. So to support rate of sale, these short videos were designed to elicit an almost Pavlovian response. So getting into the middle of the funnel, I'll skip into the bottom of the funnel now, an example of some activity that was designed to just drive sales, give people a reason to purchase. So to drive DTC sales, we introduced an innovative online personalization tool, and to promote it, we built some social-friendly animations asking people whose initials they would choose, and we made a bunch of videos, bespoke videos for different punters' initials. Storybooks, very similar, DTC product activation towards the bottom of the funnel. And then the very bottom of what is in fact actually an hourglass rather than a full is the kind of advocacy piece. So for example, in Bridgend movie nights, cinemas were closed and get-togethers were off the table. As one of the first brands globally to tie in with Netflix Party, our movie nights enabled viewers to synchronize their streams for a remote yet shared viewing experience. And again, the point I'm making here really is to highlight something that was kind of almost like in a world first, certainly probably for a Scottish brand. And one last example from the paper itself. So cocktails from the cupboard, again, advocacy. So with cocktails cancelled and bartenders out of work, we stepped in, inviting consumers to tag their friends and ask what was in their fridges, and created bespoke cocktail films responding to every single one of hundreds of comments with a unique recipe. So a nice idea, but again, making the point that we're taking it further. We responded to every single comment that we got. The results section, just to give you an overview of, again, what's in here. So as you'd expect, digital results, lots of nice bar charts going in the right direction for things like reach and ad recall, 100%-ish plus growth. Brand metrics, again, spontaneous, showing awareness, showing good growth. Purchase intent, getting to the commercial side of it and comparing us with our competitors. And then those kind of brand pillars showing that we actually not only became well known for positive things, but for the things we wanted to be known for versus competitors. The film itself showing that it made people feel good and created a good image for the brand and was enjoyable to watch. The conversion funnel, and then more detail on the conversion funnel, which again I'll come back to in a sec. And then the commercial results, where we dig into the kind of commercial numbers. So I'll return to some of those bits in a second, but that gives you an overview of what was in it and kind of some of the reasons why things were there. But the first tip, the judges are your customers. So we all, of course, work in marketing. We understand how to engage people. And I approach writing an award paper with that same mindset. You know, things like, okay, how do I make sure I get noticed? How do I make sure my paper is remembered? In amongst maybe 20 odd papers the judges are judging. I judge as well, and you do learn a hell of a lot about how to spot what's good and what's not so good when you look at lots and lots of papers. But most importantly of all, of course, like any marketing communication, that works, make me feel something. This is about storytelling, and I'm sure you'll hear this again today, in the notion and the importance of telling a compelling and dramatic, to be honest, story. So in this case, we took, I guess, the story angle of David versus Goliath, and just to show you how we bring that to life in that very first context slide, again, I'll just read this out. Entering 2020, Edinburgh Gin already faced intense competitive pressure. Some 800 craft gin brands alongside behemoth global players whose resources and distribution might dwarf those of independent challenger brands like us. And then the pandemic struck. Most alcohol brands did the sensible thing, battering down the hatches and cutting budgets to shore up margin in the face of a decimated on-trade. We wondered, what if we approached this unprecedented adversity as an opportunity to recalibrate our strategy and tactics at breakneck speed and emerge strengthened rather than weakened? This is the story of how we did it. And if that wasn't enough, here's the prophet of doom on the right-hand side saying the aftershocks of COVID should see bigger brand owners increase their share while the smaller craft producers go out of business. So really creating the drama, you know, really setting the scene of storytelling and engaging things in a kind of emotive, emotional way. We also ask ourselves as brand owners and agencies a lot, what's our proposition? And I ask myself the same question when I write an awards paper. The core proposition, as I said in this case, was that notion of a full funnel approach. That's the key premise. That's the single big idea that everything else is kind of hanging around. The judges are clueless, and I know this because I'm one of them. I mean, of course they're not. Judges are very experienced, skilled, beautiful people, but it's very dangerous to assume knowledge in particular areas. If you think about it, most judges will probably be a specialist in a particular sector or a particular discipline, and if they are, they're probably entering that category. So they're not judging that category, so they're judging a different category, which they may be less of a specialist in. So it's not that they're clueless, it's just that it's your job and our job to give them the clues to unpick your story. And what I'm getting at here is context is everything. This is probably the most important point I could make about writing award papers. If you compare this statement, we increased banana sales by 23%. Sounds pretty good, pretty impressive. With this statement, the average year-on-year sales decline among our banana-bearing competitors was 7%. With no increase in annual marketing spend, we increased banana sales by 23%. Suddenly, with a bit of framing, it's just a hell of a lot more compelling, and it's easy to understand as a judge why it's good or how good it is. Simple example again, in the case of this paper, we compared purchase intent with competitors to contextualize it. Taking that a little bit further, attribution is always a key thing I look for as a judge, asking that question, was it down to this activity or was it down to other things? And it's sometimes hard to tell, but you can answer that question for the judge with a simple chart like this that shows that for a digital paper and a digital category, yes, digital was a key factor in the results. And one last thought on this kind of storytelling side of it, make it compelling and make it more compelling. So with this funnel data, I was able to see from the funnel data that Edinburgh Gin was beating its competitors, top chart there in the green bar at each stage of the funnel. But you would expect that if you fill the top of the funnel with more people and all other things being equal, you should flow through with more at every stage. So I wanted to prove it was even better than that. I did some analysis looking at the conversion from stage to stage. So from buying once to buying regularly, and found that Edinburgh Gin was actually out-punching competitors in the conversion from stage to stage at every stage. So just making it good, but then making it even better. Tip 3, start at the end. By this, I'm talking about results. And again, you'll hear more about this today, but results, probably the most important thing. And it's why, of course, it's why brands spend money on marketing, stating the obvious. Just to give you a sense of how much importance we placed on that in this paper. Again, that's the overall structure. If you count the sections, there's 3 pages there on objectives, there's 3 pages on strategy, there's 9 pages on the actual activity, 9 pages on results. And if you add up objectives and results together, which are kind of 2 sides of the same coin, that's the biggest section. We're devoting a lot of space and time, not necessarily words, a lot of charts, but a lot of space and time to results. And asking ourselves this question, the reason I say start at the end, I mean start with looking at your results first before you sit down to write a paper, and ask yourself this honest question, when you look at those results and you really scrutinize them, you will be up against people with pretty stellar results, and ask yourself, is this really good enough? Because it's a lot of work to write a paper, and if it isn't really good enough, don't waste your time. Tip 4, rack up the Red Bull. I often get asked how long does it take to write a paper, and what I say is figure out how long you think it will take and times it by 3. That's my rule, and I honestly do that. I think, right, I need 3 days to write this, so we'll call it 9. It seems to be how long it tends to take. And another just quick little tip on that to make it more efficient for you. It took me a few years to figure this one out, but the way I do it now is I have a layout on a paper and a document, sort of text boxes and shapes and sizes. I don't need all the design done, I don't need all the assets, but I write the words then in that template. And the key point being it's a template that I can edit. What I used to do was write the words, give it to a designer, make it look nice, give it to the client, get it edited, edit it myself, back to the designer. If you can edit your template, it's so much quicker and easier. Tip number 5, change the world, share the love. This is a bit highfalutin, but that's the point. The footnote, the very last slide in our paper talked about what could the industry potentially learn from this. And I do think that's an important point. If you have something genuinely groundbreaking, genuinely innovative, genuinely world-class, highlight that, because the whole point of awards, of course, is for us all to learn from our contemporaries. And I think judges put a lot of stock in that kind of thing of like, there's something new here, there's something worthwhile here. And lastly, how to cheat. I might have cheated you with this one, to be honest, but at least I've kept you sitting there. But no, I can offer you one little tip on how to potentially get maybe 3 for the price of 1. So the paper I've been talking about is the digital communications category, as I said, and that is the paper. We also entered the digital strategy category, and this is the paper for that. And as you can see, it's pretty much the same. The only real significant difference being this strategy section in the middle, as you'd expect for a strategy category. I kind of rewrote that, took some stuff out elsewhere. But my point being, you don't have to rewrite the whole thing. You don't have to completely customize it for another category, but a bit of customization, I think, does go a long way. And this more or less the same paper won the silver in the strategy category and also won the silver in the kind of pandemic category. So 3 for the price of 1. So that's it. Just a quick recap. The judges are your customer. Think like a brand. Think in the communications marketing type sense. Judges are clueless. Help them out. Give them the clues. Don't assume, presume knowledge. Start at the end. Start with the results and ask yourself, are they good enough? Rack up the Red Bull, it takes longer than you think, but there are ways to kind of make it more efficient. Change the world, share the love, tell us what it means, tell us what we can all learn, and how to cheat. Yeah, how to get 3 for the price of 1. And that is me. Thank you very much for listening. I'll stop sharing my screen and hand on.
Thank you very much, David. We will circle back for some questions at the end. Thanks again. I believe now we're going to pass on to Claire or Katrina.
To Kat, thanks.
Thanks, Kat.
Hello. Hopefully that's sharing okay. So hi, I am Kat Summers. I'm Deputy MD at Creative and Research Agency Ganco, based in Edinburgh. And I'm going to talk to you today about quite a fun but strategic campaign that we did for relaunching Fray Bentos, which is owned by our wonderful clients at Baxter's Food Group. So I'm going to talk to you today about pies rather, and pints. And if you haven't had your lunch, then hopefully this will be making you hungry for some pies. So this was a campaign and a paper that we wrote about the brand repositioning and relaunch for Fray Bentos. We entered it last year into both the brand development and food categories, and it got gold in food and silver in brand development. So to give you a bit of a flavour of kind of where we got to with the campaign, what it was all about, before I give you hopefully some helpful hints and tips. It was all about how we really repositioned the brand Fray Bentos, kind of famed for its pies, around this idea of pub grub at home, how we really targeted new consumers and really went after younger male consumers, especially to really drive relevance with a broader user base, and developed this new brand platform for them, Time for a Cheeky Bentos. So it was a very fun, very cheeky campaign that really had digital and social content at its heart. It was deployed through lockdown in 2020 and into 2021 to really connect with that new audience. And it used the chap that you would have seen on your screen in front of you there, was somebody we envisaged as a kind of spokesperson for the brand called Ray Bentos, who was designed to be a bit of a pub shed landlord, his own pub shed, as they all sprouted up in lockdown. He was envisaged to be a kind of ultimate kind of Fray Bentos super fan, but allowing us to tell all the great product messages and brand messages about Fray Bentos. So I guess before we start any paper as an agency at Ganco, we always kind of force ourselves to think, do we have a brilliant story to tell? And as David was really saying, do we have the results to tell that story convincingly? So we always kind of have this discipline about writing our elevator pitch for the paper before we spend all the time and energy and passion in writing it, thinking, what is that elevator pitch? What's the big story that we want to tell? And what is that killer result that's going to back it up? Because as David was saying, if you don't have that, then it might not be worth your while, or actually might be worth hanging on for another year. We've got quite a few campaigns at Ganco at the moment that are quite recently launched, and we just haven't quite got the full results to back them up. So we're kind of taking a decision to pause and wait a year. So that's okay too. Just make sure that over the next year, you're doing everything you can to really gather those results and build a brilliant case study for next year. So this discipline of writing an elevator pitch, we think is a brilliant starting point. What's the big story and what's the killer results? So for Fray Bentos, we wrote it as cheeky brand repositioning and relaunch campaign that helped Fray Bentos grow at double the rate of the category. Take you through some of the results that got us there, but that was our big killer result. That actually it was really, really accelerating what the tinned, the ambient category was doing anyway, especially during lockdown when people were buying more tinned products as we were all stocking up. But that double category growth rate was really, really compelling. Secondly, I guess what you'll see in this paper, and was what I like to do, is really use the brand to aid the brand storytelling. So you'll probably see as we go through lots of pies and puns, kind of unashamedly using the brand personality to tell the story. As an agency, I think it's always a tension, because you want to kind of put your own agency approach and your own agency brand out there. But we're big believers in using our clients' brands to really bring it to life, because as David was saying, it's so important to treat the judge almost as a consumer and do that storytelling. So you'll see as we go through lots of, I guess, pub imagery and pub banter. So using a lot of pub slang for headings, and lots of brilliant imagery as well. So I was very lucky that I got to work with one of our brilliant designers, Michael at Guy & Co, who did a fantastic job of helping me bring this paper to life. It does create more work, as David was saying. It can be a lot of back and forward on edits and approval. But you can see here, it can be quite fun and really grab the judge's attention. So we had a lot of fun with the pub imagery around chalkboards, menu boards, grit mats to bring it all to life. But really important that there is obviously a lot of strategic rigor to everything that you're talking about and bringing to life. It can just be a way of really getting brilliant points, especially around presentation of entry, but make sure it's not style over substance. It's all got to be on point. So going into the paper, what I always like to start off by doing is really grab the judge's interest and really kind of hook their appetite to read on. So set up a really clear background, kind of what was the context, set the scene for them, and really try and strike a chord with the judge. So in this case, Free Bentos, it's a fantastic kind of fabric British brand that most people have heard of. So it's quite easy to really strike that emotional chord. So we started this by saying, you've heard of it, surely. Maybe your mum fed you pies on the odd occasion when you were a kid, or you've got some meatballs lurking at the back of your cupboard. So really play on those rich associations that may already be there for the judge. Then going into really set up, what was the big challenge? What was our brief? In this case, the brand, with changes in brand ownership, it had lost its way a little bit. This was really the start of big investment by Baxter's Food Group into Free Bentos. But the brand and category wasn't in brilliant health. Penetration was just 0.6% of the UK population. So there was a lot to do to really get penetration up and also attract new users into the brand. It was really skewed towards older males and couples. So it was all about how do we bring new and especially younger consumers into the brand. And then we also really kind of dramatized the problem, which was a brand problem, but also a category problem. So this shows that canned pies were really in decline, especially since 2017. You can see in the kind of fun chart there, but really dramatizing a really important point, that it was all about how do we reinvigorate the Free Bentos brand, but how do we reinvigorate the categories as well? You know, it's not the sexiest of categories, I guess, tinned pies and kind of ambient products. But how can we reinvigorate that? And this was also to not just relaunch their pies, but also to launch new products into the range as well. So they were launching new microwavable pots, which I guess heat in 2 minutes, and really nice, convenient range extension for them. So really dramatizing that problem from the get-go to really grab the judge's interest. Next, as David was saying as well, really important that you set out really clear objectives so that the judges can completely understand exactly what you set out to do. And then when you go through results, you can really show that you nailed those objectives. And always try to ladder up from, you know, in this case, obviously it was a rich campaign. It was a digital and social relaunch campaign. Campaign was important, but we really had to ladder up to big objectives around the brand and around commercials as well. So we laid out 3 meaty objectives. The first one was about building brand strength. So through this, Free Bentos wanted to premiumise their offering. They wanted to defend against retail discounting and allow for premiumisation across the pies. And they'd put more meaty and cheesy fillings into them and wanted to command a higher price point. So it's how do we build that brand strength and help them increase their price point and grow value? Secondly, it was all about relevance. So how do we bring in new users, and how do we really grow that category penetration? And thirdly was the really big commercial objective. So building new occasions for the brand and really extending the range as well, especially with the launch of these new microwavable pots, and really growing frequency and distribution so that we could scale the brand. So then as we kind of skip through, I won't take you through slide by slide, but I think one of the big things we try to do is, you know, use a really logical structure as you go through your paper, and have headings that really cover off the scoring criteria. So when a judge is scoring it, they see that you've worked through all of the elements and they can really understand the component parts of your work and of your paper. So you can see in this paper that we went through all of the elements, all the building blocks of a great campaign, everything from commercial planning, which is where we identified, I guess, who our target audiences were and why they were going to be lucrative. So in this case, it was about existing users on the left-hand side who were slightly older, the older singles and couples, but that maybe had lapsed or were infrequent buyers of the brand. So how do we get Fray Bentos back on their radar and back on their shopping list? And then the really important one on the right-hand side was new users. So how can we target 16 to 25-year-old males who are big consumers of hot tinned meals, and I guess really looking for quick and easy meals and that convenience and taste. But at this point, they weren't very aware of Fray Bentos. It's not being as big in their generation, and the brand just didn't have as much relevance with them either. So how could we really drive that relevancy with a new user? Then skip through brand planning, which was all about kind of what were the opportunities for the brand. You can see how we mapped out the competitive set and tried to really define a clear commercial space for the brand to play in. And on the right-hand side was actually a process that we worked through to arrive at a really clear and meaningful proposition for the brand, where we tested 4 different proposition territories with consumers. We do that in-house at Gangco. We tested where the brand was currently, which was the 4th one, which was welcome home, quite a kind of wholesome territory, more focused on kind of family and wholesome meals. And then we tested 3 potential new proposition territories. One of them being this idea of pub grub, all about convenience and the warmth of pub world. So you can see that we really clearly kind of showed the brand planning process through those, and how we arrived at a really clear consumer insight and this new positioning around pub style grub at home that had this functional benefit of kind of being easy, tasty, feel, and emotional benefit of being quite real, no-nonsense food that you would associate with going down the British pub. And that we could really build this new ritual for the brand around pint a pint, which felt really credible and really compelling. We then skipped through comms planning, where we laid out a really clear approach to how we were going to deliver the campaign around 3 buckets. So rethinking, how would we get people to think differently about the brand? Talkability, how do we get people talking about the brand, the new recipe pies and the new pots? And ultimately the big commercial one, buy, how would we get the brand front of mind and really motivate purchase? Laying out a really clear comms plan, through to creative planning, where we really lent on this idea of kind of British pub culture as a kind of great creative springboard for where we got to, that had real credibility with the brand, but also with the target audience as well. And then right through to the big idea. And with this, we really want to be confident in the articulation of what that big creative idea was. So you can see here that we demonstrated that we'd got to this new brand platform about time for Cheeky Bentos, and everything that our chap, Cheeky chap Ray Bentos was setting out to deliver, that he becomes the personification of the brand and this spokesperson to front all of our digital communications. The ultimate pie, Fray Bentos pie superfan. We had a lot of fun bringing him out in this campaign. Beyond the big idea, we also wanted to show kind of the stretch of the executions. This had to be not just a big idea, but a big flexible idea to talk about all the range, all of the product benefits and all of the occasions as well. So you can see different executions we had for things like the recipes with Get In My Son, more meat and the new pies. Look at the head on that, became a way of talking about the crust on the pies. Fancy a swift one for the 2-minute convenient microwavable pots, right through to executions to drive occasions, things like night off cooking during the week, and the pie and pint kind of sport ritual as well, the game of two halves. So we showed how we really took the big creative idea of Time for Cheeky Bentos and stretched it across this whole kind of pub world to create a really kind of flexible campaign idea and suite of executions. And then also showing real implementation, which is one of the big scoring criteria. But what I tried to do is not just kind of, I guess, throw it all down and out there, but make sure it's really kind of synced with the comms plan, if it is a kind of campaign example that you're presenting. So you can see here that we mapped out all the different executions across that comms plan. So Rethink was showing some of what we did from the awareness driving content and to drive awareness and engagement. Talk, you can see examples of what we did to inspire user-generated content. We had competitions to win a year's supply of pies. We had pub quizzes. We had partnerships with the likes of It's Gone Viral. So showing all of that good stuff, but making sure it still harks back to your strategic pillars. And in the final buy bucket, showing all the retailer activation that we did. So there's a lot of point of sale and retail toolkits that we put out there to really make sure we got that purchase in store. And then the all important bit at the end, so results. And as David quite rightly saying, effectiveness really is everything. So this section is so important, and it's important that you don't leave it last in the thought process. And for me, what's really important in stepping out the results and awards paper is doing it in a way that looks back to the objectives. So showing that you achieved everything that you set out to do at the start of the paper, and that if you can, if it's a consumer brand example like this one, that you can ladder up to the big killer commercials. So you can see in this paper, we watched through objective by objective. So around building brand strength, we sifted with the client through lots of Nielsen sales data, and were able to unpick that the average price went up 26% year on year, and value sales went up 24% year on year. Despite volume leveling out, we were able to increase Free Bentos retail price point, and the value sales went up significantly. In building brand relevance in the user base, we had lots of great stats around engagement levels, especially with our younger target audience, and showed that we really exceeded a lot of the targets for things like the It's Gone Viral partnership. We were able to say that we doubled the target of video views, so really being tangible on results like that. But the big killer stat here was that we managed to get household penetration up. We were able to bring new households into the brand and get that up by 12% year on year, and able to show that that wasn't just a symptom of the category growing, especially during lockdown when people were buying more ambient. So hot tinned meals actually went up 6%, and we were able to demonstrate that Free Bentos kind of accelerated that and went up 12% year on year. And actually, when we split off the data and looked at under 35 from the Nielsen data, we were able to show that that was even more of an uplift, and we increased it by 20% year on year. So it really supported that outreach strategy for the brand. And the third one, really the big commercials around building brand occasions and the range. We were able to demonstrate that there were 13.8 million Free Bentos occasions over this year, and that was actually up 10.5% year on year. And again, looking at kind of how the brand tracked against the category, we're able to show that that was double the rate of the growth of the category. And that becomes really, really compelling that, again, we can dedupe it and say that You know, to David's brilliant example of the banana, that actually it's all about framing. It's all about what's the category context and showing that what you did worked versus what the category was doing anyway. So that became our big killer stat, that actually we grew the brand at double the rate of the category. And then finally, what I quite like to do in awards papers as well is really kind of round things off, you know, a really confident and clear summary that leaves no doubt in the judge's head. So you can see here that we talked about playing a blinder, and that this really is just the start of a brilliant new chapter for Free Brentos. So summarising some of the big points around, you know, building this really credible positioning and cheeky personality that's given Free Brentos this new lease of life. It's become a confident and consumer validated trade selling. It gives them a brilliant direction and pipeline for new product development around the idea of pub grub. It's become this engaging and campaignable consumer platform that can only continue to build momentum with continued investment, that can bring in new users, and really demonstrated that we have kind of fired up commercial results with that killer result about growing at double the rate of the category. So that's the kind of thing that hopefully just hits the judges between the eyes and makes them sit up and take notice. And in your papers, if you can demonstrate a kind of a real tangible return on investment as well, those are the kind of things that are going to get big ticks and kind of lots of scores in your awards paper. So to summarize, I guess what some of the bits I think are kind of winning ingredients with papers like this. I think it's going into it kind of knowing what your elevator pitch is from the start. You know, it's a really good discipline, and it means you're not going to waste anybody's time, and also helps get real alignment between you, you know, in an agency's case with your client, maybe with an agency roster as well. What is the story you're going to tell, and what are the killer results that are going to back it up? Secondly, you know, if you can, it's not right for everybody, but if you can use the brand personality to really tell the story, it can become really, really compelling, and it can win you big points around presentation and craft of writing. Killer results, but making sure they really look back to your original objectives so that the judge can see actually everything that you set out to do, you absolutely did. And just really making it impossible for a judge not to be impressed, and a really confident summary of everything that you achieved. And I think that's me. Thank you very much. I think I'm massively overrun there, apologies. Sorry, Claire, next up.
Sorry, I'm trying to take myself off mute and speak at the same time. Right, can people see my slides?
We can, Claire, yeah, if you just hit the share screen. Lovely. That's it.
So it's working now?
Yeah, yes, we can see it, thank you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Right, hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to try and do this in 4 minutes, so that we end up back in on time and you've still got time for questions. So it might not work. If I go too fast, apologies. But having said all of that, having followed on from these excellent presentations from David and Kat on gin and pies, I'm going to talk about coronavirus, so maybe it's right that I have less time than the other two to share their insights with how you might tackle a star paper. I'm talking about a cracking paper that was put together principally by a wonderful planner called Thea at the Leith Agency. We tend to work jointly on drafts of things. In this instance, I wrote a draft that was tolerable, and then she wrote a draft that was excellent, and that turned into the paper that won. So all credit for her for taking my workmanlike work and making it into something starry and golden and wonderful. But the reason that we put the paper together was because we put this campaign together in the beating heart of the pandemic. So take yourselves back to the 23rd of March, 2020. The 3 points that I'd like to make today in terms of what it takes to put together an award-winning paper are these. You need a great story, you need to pay attention to the detail, and you need a little bit of insight to sprinkle on top of that like fairy dust. But rewinding to June 2020, pandemic was sort of declared, if you like. The country was sort of shut down on the 23rd of March 2020, and we all got used to staying at home and having our little hour a day exercise and not quite knowing what to do with ourselves. It was a strange old time. But you move forward a little bit to June of that year, and things were starting to relax. The infection rates were starting to tail off a little bit. We were starting to be able to think about returning some version of normal. But as the government, we had the unenviable job of trying to persuade people not to go crazy, not to socialise with free abandon, and potentially risk spreading the virus further than absolutely necessary. And we need to try and create advertising to encourage people to follow the guidance that the government had put in place to try and keep people as safe as possible during the heat of the pandemic. And so we found ourselves in June 2020 with this route map that had been announced by Nicola Sturgeon that guided us through the various stages that would need to be met to introduce increasing freedoms to the country. And we were given the unenviable task of trying to create an advertising campaign to encourage people to pay full attention to all of these restrictions and ideally stick to the letter as much of this as the spirit of this guidance to ensure that the country stayed as safe as possible. We did a huge amount of research to help inform the creation of this advertising campaign, just as you'd imagine. And there's loads of detail in this chart, so in the name of time, I won't dwell on it. But I suppose the really important thing to say when you're trying to create a star paper is, from my point of view, I guess I would say this as a planner, the research and the insight, what you can learn about the targeted audience and how that informs the advertising that you need to create on the back of that is part of what makes a really interesting story in a star paper. So that when that shines through, when I'm judging these categories, when that shines through from a paper, I always feel more predisposed, more inclined to reward the effort that's gone into the writing of it. So we learnt as much as we could about our different target audiences. We whisked that into a brief, we popped it over to Leith. We had a ridiculously tight timescale for putting this particular campaign together. We were always working a little bit on the hoof during the pandemic because things were changing so fast. So I think this campaign was created from start to finish in 17 days, which is a bit of an absurdity. But the guys at Leith did a tremendous amount of work with excellent support from the guys at Republic when it came to planning the media spaces that got the campaign out and about in front of people and did help us meet our live date of the 9th of July. The creative work is all summarised in the award-winning star paper very ably. I was most excited. This is so ridiculous in the middle of a pandemic, but I was most excited from this campaign, apart from the beautiful creative idea that ran across the film and this and that. We had Instagram stickers, and I think it was the first time the Scottish Government had made Instagram stickers. A little example on the right here. So that was one of the highlights for me, absurdly. So first and foremost, and David and Kat have both said this, when you're writing a star paper, the thing that's important is the story. Telling the story as captivatingly and interestingly as possible, recognising all of the things the guys have said already about not assuming that your judges and your audience know exactly what you're talking about. So explain it as clearly as you possibly can. And interesting degrees of difference between what David and Kat have said, but I think the results are absolutely obviously key to demonstrating that everything that you've done has worked, but demonstrating how it's worked and why it's worked is as important as the numbers themselves, I would say. But the other two bits of advice.
But if you can hear me, David, here, I don't know if it's just me, but I don't know if your slides are advancing through for others.
Okay, maybe not. They're advancing for me, but that doesn't help anything.
I'm still on slide 1, but I don't know if it's just me. I would just try resharing it and see if it fixes it.
Claire, I can open them here and move them on. If you want to just keep chatting, I'll just pull them up.
Well, I can try again.
It's moved on now.
It's moved on. I'm so sorry, everyone. How dull for you. So you can see perhaps the slide that says insight and it's blank.
I think you just need to hit the full screen button again because we can see your slides on the left as well. So we just go into the full.
I'm on full screen on my laptop, which is a puzzle, isn't it? Do you know, maybe given that it's 8 minutes to 3, I should just say a little bit and then we can just take questions. Do you think maybe that's a better use of time rather than me trying to gamely finish my presentation?
That sounds great, Claire. Thank you.
Awesome. So the other two bits of advice would pay attention to the detail when it comes to writing a paper, and the guys have covered this in far more detail than I would, so I shan't dwell on that. But I think the other point that's really interesting, and David said this too, what can the industry learn from this? I think the thing where star papers become really exciting is when you can share stuff that people might not have seen or thought about before. In the case of this particular paper, we paid particular attention to a couple of documents, a paper published by a professor at St Andrews University who was talking about the psychology of the pandemic and how you can encourage people to behave in the sorts of ways that you want them to. That proved hugely influential for our thinking. But we also took a lot from a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by a professor called Daniel Kahneman. And he writes about conscious thought and unconscious thought and the ways in which you can deploy those thoughts to encourage people to behave in the sorts of ways that you might want them to. And so using the insight from this paper by Stephen Riker alongside this Thinking Fast and Slow System 1 and System 2 thinking proved really helpful and interesting when it came to moving the campaign forward, informing the way that it was shaped and then informing the creative treatment of the campaign. But also I think the detail that was shared in the paper of how those two sets of insight were used to inform the campaign development were genuinely interesting, hopefully genuinely interesting to the wider marketing community. And I think where star papers can be so valuable is by teaching us stuff that we maybe haven't thought about before, sharing information, sharing insight, sharing different ways of doing things. And so I hope that that was part of the reason that this was felt to be good enough to warrant a Golden Award. Thank you. Sorry you didn't get my slides. They weren't as pretty as the pie slides though, so maybe it's not such a loss. I'll stop there. Paul, thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire, David, and Kat for sharing those case studies and insights. I'm a little bit conscious it is 6 minutes to 3, and I'm sure everyone has other online calls to get to. We do, however, have one great question from Gillian. I think it was to David, but it may well be one that others want to chip in on. So the question was, do you build in which work to select to enter for awards as a routine thing, as part of your evaluation process for each piece of work, or do you review on an annual basis and then decide if or what to enter?
So for my taking that short answer is no. I mean, it'd be lovely if we did, but we don't really plan in that well in advance. Partly because I think it gets to the end of the year and you want to look back on the year and make a view on what was the best work. And for us, a lot of the work happens pre-Christmas, so we would take a view on it then anyway, I think. But I think you have a feel for it, you know in your head when you start thinking about it what was the best work of the year. So as you go, I mean, I'm probably taking mental notes as projects happen and results come out, and I'm thinking, oh, there's a paper on that, but not in any structured way, to be honest.
Would you build on that, Claire or Kat? I mean, we were talking about this just before we started today, and yeah, I think it depends on results, obviously, and we can't always control those things, but yeah, it may be a good thing to plan ahead.
I guess building on what David said, we would tend to think about what maybe hasn't been done before, subjects that are new or different or interesting. Last year, we wrote quite a lot about the pandemic because we'd never experienced anything like it before. So it seemed like an interesting story to bring to the community. We would tend to pay attention to things that maybe have been done for the first time. If a media agency have tried a really different and interesting partnership, for example, we might try and create a story around that. So we'd look to showcase best practice, different, innovative, interesting ways of doing things, so that we can share them more widely and hopefully help others learn from them.
I think we try to go through our year always thinking about what's the work that we're doing as an agency, what could be award-winning work, because I think it really thrashes us to continually think about effectiveness as well, and making sure that we're measuring everything, we're evaluating. But obviously the deadline come February always puts a rocket up your arse to excuse my language, to really kind of think about what you're submitting. But I think, if you can, just having conversations with your team, with your clients throughout the year about what might be a brilliant story and brilliant effectiveness to enter into awards throughout the year.
I was really intrigued. You touched on the formulation of objectives and investigation of results as a team with the client. And Claire, you touched on a really fast briefing process. And I just wondered, Kat, if you can touch on how that process works, because perhaps the attendees here are already thinking about, well, should I speak to my agency, or if you're an agency, how and when do I speak to my client, and how do we agree on those objectives that allow the entry to build from there?
I think just good discipline going into any project, any campaign, being obviously really clear with your client, with your team about what those objectives are. And then just making sure, if you are putting an award together as a bigger team, just making sure you've got real alignment, making sure you're really clear on those objectives, make them really laser focused.
And then clearing the diary in the few days before the 14th of February.
Definitely, and loads of Red Bull, as David says.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, thanks very much, David, Kat, and Claire for sharing those case studies. I think Graham's alluded to in the comments there, but we're going to share the case studies in a follow-up email. And I just wanted to just reiterate that will come tomorrow, and we'll ask for feedback. And all of your feedback as attendees, observers, and members of the Marketing Society is valued in changing how we shape the awards and indeed these sessions. I just wanted to promote or talk about one other thing as a next Marketing Society event, and that's an industry insight session with ICAS. It's around the importance of mental health and well-being as a strategic priority in business. Of course, a massive priority, perhaps even more so over the last 2 years, whilst everyone's been working remotely and dealing with challenging work and personal life situations. That's streaming live on the 17th of January, so on Monday from 2 to 3 p.m. And we'll be hearing from a couple of experts in Johnny Jacobs, the Finance Director of Starbucks and the Trustee of the Mental Health Foundation, and Jeff McDonald, who is a keynote speaker who specialises in business transformation and is also a mental health campaigner. So with that, I will thank the guests and attendees again for joining, and indeed for showing interest in the Star Awards and entering an award into one or multiple categories. We'll be grateful again if you can help us by filling in the feedback that has popped up in front of me as I talk to myself on Zoom right now. And all the relative links, deadlines and information again will be shared by email tomorrow. And there we are, exactly on 3 p.m. So I wish you all the best of luck and happy entry writing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, folks.
Good luck, everyone. Cheers.
Bye-bye.